it's me, Jay, your GM. I use him, and today I am recording solo. I recently got in a conversation with someone on a Discord about travel in their game, and I have a few thoughts about travel, and the conversation was very productive, and it seemed like people were interested in what I had to say, so maybe other people will be interested as well. So, here's the thing about travel. Travel can be really boring, and it can be really bad. It can suck. It can really, really suck. I mean, let's go right into the philosophy. Rule number one, you gotta maintain tension. The problem with a journey, especially in something like D&D, where you can take a long rest every night, is that everything that happens during the day doesn't matter once you sleep. So, there's no tension across the journey. We've got to introduce tension across the journey. Number two, you get what you give out of travel. More than most things in D&D, you really only get out of travel what you put into travel. It's possible with a dungeon to get more out of it than you put into it because the process of going through a dungeon is fun. It's also really easy during an adventure to get more out of it than you put into it because during an adventure, your players are going to create some of their own fun. But I think both players and GMs struggle to understand how to put in effort and extract reward during travel. And I do think it falls on both parties. Rule 2A, the fun of exploration is in discovery. The GM has to do work before the journey begins to decide what is interesting about the place we're traveling through, what is threatening about the place that we're traveling through, and what are some cool events that can happen along the way that are going to make this journey memorable. And events don't have to be combats. In fact, I would recommend that only about half of the events in your travel be combat. Because events can be encountering a group along the road, encountering a monster in the woods, encountering a magical, beautiful location. Can be all sorts of things. Rule 2B is the fun of travel is bonding. So this falls entirely on the players. Your GM cannot make you interact with other players at the table. I will repeat that. Your GM cannot make you friends with the other people in your party. You have to do that. That is your job as the player. The GM is there to give you an adventure, to give you exciting settings, to set up the monsters, to set up enemies, to set up NPCs. But becoming friends with the other people in your party, caring about them, and them caring about you, is entirely your job as the player. Which means, when you are traveling, you should be starting conversations with other members of your party. You should be asking them about their past. You should be asking them about what they think or feel about the adventure so far, how they're reacting to things. Ask them how they're feeling after X event in the last adventure happened to them. These sorts of things will build bonds in the party and make travel a rewarding part of the narrative. Rule number 3, don't overstay your welcome. Travel is not the focus of your campaign, by and large. So, you shouldn't make this a really long, epic saga. I would say 2 to 3 sessions is the bearable amount of travel for people to go through. 4 sessions is right on the upper limit, and I would try to keep it between 2 and 4 sessions, including the combats. So I think during travel you want to run short, simple combats that can be done in 30 minutes or so. Not a ton of enemies, not a ton of high threat opponents. The purpose of these combats is to break up the travel a little bit, to let your players use some of their resources and abilities, and to drain off some of the resources to ratchet up the tension of things that will come later. But each thing in the journey should only be around 30 minutes. Each of your events that you're planning to put forward with the party. Implementation. So how does the philosophy that I've just laid out turn into rules that we can actually use? Well, rule number 1, resting happens at the end of the journey. During the journey, you cannot regain all your resources. If you're playing a system like D&D, that means you can take short rests at night, but you cannot take long rests. In a system like Draw Steel, that's already taken care of for us. Draw Steel only has you taking a long rest when you're in town and resting. During each day of travel, this is sort of taken from Ryutama, we're going to roll a series of checks. The first is a check to maintain our course. We're going to check to see if we get lost. Number 2 is a check to keep an eye out for danger. We're going to see if we notice any hazards. Hazards doesn't necessarily mean enemy encounters. Hazards could be, a thicket of brambles, vines that are thick across the forest floor, a ravine that suddenly cuts across in front of you, a river that has a surprising amount of current that could sweep you off your feet, etc., etc., etc. So keeping an eye out for danger. And then finally, we are trying to do a test to avoid fatigue. This is a party test. The whole party makes the test, and then they pass or fail as a party. If they fail, then they're going to get a little bit of fatigue. So check outcomes. If the heroes fail one check, each player that rolled that check takes a level of fatigue. So, for example, if the person keeping an eye out for maintaining their course failed, then that person takes a level of fatigue. However, if they rolled to avoid fatigue and they failed that check, everybody in the party takes a level of fatigue. If there are 2 or more failures, then we're going to roll on the calamity table, which is listed below. So I actually don't even need these. So, next up, while camping, this is sort of your end of the day checklist. While camping, we roll morale. Morale is a thing that I will explain later. Next up, we're going to roll for the weather on the next journey increment. Journey increment here just is my shorthand for saying, we don't necessarily have to roll these checks for each day of the journey. If the journey is going to be months and months long, we could be rolling for each week or each month even, depending on how long the journey is. We don't need to be rolling these checks every single day if the journey is super long. But if the journey is only like 2 weeks long, I would roll for each day. And then finally, we're going to check our supplies, and I'll explain supplies next. Periodic events. This is where we get back to you get what you give. The GM prepares 4 to 7 periodic planned events that will be distributed throughout this journey. I don't like random tables for these periodic events. These periodic events should advance the narratives of the players, should advance the narrative of the world, should build the setting, should enhance the place that they're traveling through and make it more memorable. These need to be a little more specific. Now, you can always roll in a random table to get an inspiration and then flesh that out, but I don't want you at the table with your players rolling on a randomized chart for the event. If your campaign is a hex crawl, or if you're really big into hex crawls, sure, go nuts. But personally, I think we should treat a journey like a dungeon, and we should plan every room of the dungeon. We should plan these 4 to 7 periodic events. Half of these periodic events can be combats. I wouldn't do more than half on combat. And these periodic events don't have to be every single day. Like I said, 4 to 7. So if you're traveling for 12 days, then you're only going to be doing these every other day, basically. And then my last piece of principal advice here is end on a boss fight. Journeys should be dramatic, just like anything else in your campaign, and they should end on a big climactic finale. There's nothing worse than a journey that ends with, and you arrive at town. It's just boring. I want you to end with a terrifying monster of the deep woods coming out and attacking your party, or the individual who's been pursuing your party this entire time suddenly catches up and now he launches into an ambush on the party. Something that has been building over the course of the journey should present itself as the boss. Just like at the end of a dungeon, we have a boss fight. At the end of a journey, we should have a boss fight. So, I'll explain a few ideas here. Supplies, we went through the usage die from Black Hack last video. If you saw that, then you already basically get the concept here. Basically, depending on how well supplied you are, you give your party a D10, a D8, or a D6. Each day, they will roll, and each travel increment. So it could be each week or each month, whatever. If they roll a 1 or a 2, that die decrements. It gets smaller. If they ever roll a 1 or a 2 on a D4, they have run out of resources, and every time they have to check their supplies again after this, and if they haven't solved the problem, then they're going to start starving. And you can basically implement that however you want. I suggested they take 3 levels of fatigue and damage for each day. It's up to you. Fatigue here is not exhaustion in D&D. Fatigue basically just means whatever your game you're playing considers a limited resource, you drain some of that limited resource off. That's what fatigue means. So in D&D, that could be hit dice. In Draw Steel, that would be recoveries. In Pathfinder or D&D, it could be spell slots. Whatever you want it to be, that is what they lose when they take a level of fatigue. Morale. Each night, your players get to propose an activity, play it out, and based on the result of their proposal and their check, they will recover some resources. Now, if they do really, really great, you might give the whole party a D3, and they can regain 1 to 3 of their resources. In the same things that they're losing when they take fatigue, they will gain when they use morale. Alternatively, you could just make it one player who rolls a D3 for the whole party, and then they get to divvy it up however they want. So 3 people can gain back a hit dice or a recovery, or 1 person can gain back 3 recoveries if they've had an especially hard time, etc., etc., etc. Weather. Each day we're going to roll weather. I just roll a D3. And then on a 1 or 2, the weather changes. On a 3, it stays the same. We start at calm, it goes to difficult, and then it goes to hostile. If you're at difficult, you could flip a coin and determine if it gets calmer or more hostile. That's if you want, like, truly random weather each day. If you want, like, just truly bad weather, like it's always getting worse, then you could have it go all the way up and then come all the way back down, and all the way up and all the way back down, etc., etc., etc. But the point is, we're keeping it very simple, we're keeping it very light, and then we have some consequences written out here if you roll poorly if you have like hostile weather or difficult weather. You're gonna have disadvantage on your checks or tests. Disadvantage here in D&D has an obvious mechanical meaning. In other games, it could be a boon or a bane or anything like that. You know, we're trying to keep it pretty system agnostic here. And then finally, I have an example of a calamity table. This will be linked in the document below the video, so you don't need to like read through all of this, but this is an example of a series of things that could happen if your players do particularly badly on a day's rolls. So if they fail 2 or more rolls, they have to roll on this table. Now, it's listed in a D8, so you could roll a D8 fashion, or it's listed from least bad to most bad. So if your party has been having an especially rough time and you're feeling a little pity on them, you could pick from one of the 1 to 4 options. If your party's been having an especially easy time and you want to ratchet up the difficulty, you could take a 5 to 8 option. But either way, these are all events that are supposed to represent, you know, a calamity that can happen during your journey. Importantly, none of these events are a combat encounter, will start a combat encounter, or anything else that would require a large amount of time to adjudicate. So these are all just a quick flash of something bad happens. This is the consequence of that bad thing happening. We're rolling on. So again, we don't want our calamity table or our daily rolls to be a huge impediment to daily progress. We want to keep momentum going. Ideally, we assign each of these 3 rolls to a specific player, and then we can just bang them out every day, you know, just rapid fire go through them. The morale check is the great time for the player contribution here, since the players get to determine how they interact each evening to regain resources. So this can be telling ghost stories, or singing around the campfire, or telling each other about their pasts, or talking about the events of the campaign so far. Whatever the players propose, as the GM, you're not really supposed to put your thumb on the scale here. You're not really supposed to weigh in too much. Let them role play, let them enjoy each other's company, and then reward them with a little bit of resources to incentivize them to continue to take this seriously and treat this as an important part of the journey. I think if you follow these steps and adapt them to your system of choice, you will have a fun, interesting journey every single time you go on a journey in your campaign. I've used these rules, or rough versions of these rules, on basically every journey I've done in the last 1.5 or 2 years, and they have produced some pretty fun and memorable journeys. So I do think that it can be fun to go on a journey. You just got to put in a little effort on both sides of the table. So I hope if you take nothing else away from this video, you will take this. Rule number 2, when it comes to journeys, you get what you give. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful to somebody. See you later. Goodbye.